Hello everyone, welcome back to Whodunit, where we always bring you the most chilling true crime cases. Today we'll once again dive into the heartbreaking and mysterious story of a beautiful young woman from Reno, Nevada. So let's uncover this story together. Brianna Denison, 19 years old, grew up in Reno, Nevada. She returned home for winter break with a simple but radiant plan: skiing during the day, concerts at night, and the bright hope of becoming a child psychologist, shining like streetlights after dusk. Her future looked neatly arranged, as if all it needed was the right key to open. On the night that turned into the early morning of January 18th to 19th, 2008, she left a concert early because of a cold, caught a ride back to her best friend's house, texted her boyfriend at about 4:30 a.m., then fell asleep on the couch in the kitchen, only a few steps away from the front door that was not locked. The house sank into silence, as if someone had pressed mute. By morning, her friends got up to make breakfast and assumed she had moved into the bedroom. But when the door opened, there was only emptiness. Her phone, her purse, her clothes, even her shoes were still there. Outside, it was below 0 degrees Celsius. On the pillow were a few tiny red flecks. The blanket had been dragged off the couch. The teddy bear she used as a pillow had vanished. Everyday life had shifted by only inches, yet the air froze into glass. Someone had walked straight in, left behind unknown DNA on the doorknob, and likely pressed her face into the pillow until every sound was swallowed. No scream, no struggle, just silence stretching between the kitchen and the living room. And a cold, flat question: how does someone disappear from a house full of sleeping people without waking a soul? Winter in Reno is deceptive. The bitter cold outside the warmth of a home insisted, and the easy belief that danger waits politely at the doorstep. Brianna had returned from Santa Barbara, her weekend mapped out: skiing by day, concerts by night, sleeping over at her best friend's house. Those small, ordinary pieces of life looked so sturdy. On Friday, January 18th, 2008, she arrived at her friend's house to spend the weekend with two other girls. Peace began as it often does, because no one thought to lock the door. By Saturday night, January 19th, she was fighting off a small cold. Her mother encouraged her, "Go anyway, youth needs rhythm." She went to the concert, then left early, afraid the cold would get worse. In the parking lot, she asked for a ride and came back through the cutting winter air. Her friends were still out. She waited, texted her boyfriend around 4:30 a.m., and then lay down on the kitchen couch, right by the unlocked front door, just a few steps away. Around 3:30 a.m., the other girls returned, whispered a few words, then went to bed. The silence sealed itself over the house. Around 9 a.m., the smell of breakfast spread. The girls thought Brianna had moved to the bedroom. The closed door seemed to confirm it. 40 minutes later, they knocked. No answer. They opened it, only emptiness. Her phone was there. Her purse, her clothes, even her shoes still in place. With the temperature outside below 0 degrees Celsius, there was no believable scenario in which a 19-year-old girl walked out in only a t-shirt. Her disappearance had made no sound. It had taken her and left everything else. They called Brianna's mother. She rushed over, carrying the primal fear known to anyone who has lost a loved one. Silence can be a bad omen. While searching, the girls noticed a few red stains on the pillow Brianna had used, small but heavy enough to collapse the air in the room. Police arrived quickly. There were no signs of forced entry. The blanket lay several feet from the couch. The teddy bear Brianna had used as an extra pillow was missing. These details, scattered and minor on their own, joined into a single shape: another person had moved through the night. In the first hours, Investigators feared the simplest explanation. An intruder walked through an unlocked door, went directly to a sleeping girl, and left by the same way. Forensic analysis of the pillow confirmed the blood was Brianna's. The grim reconstruction emerged, her face pressed into the pillow, suffocated into silence. On the front doorknob, police collected male DNA not found in any database. Invisible footsteps had passed through, leaving behind the one thing he could not control: biological evidence. Psychology ran in two directions. For Brianna, the fatigue of a cold had nudged her to choose the couch in the kitchen, a temporary choice anyone might make, which is exactly why it feels so tragic. For the offender, silence was ritual to subdue, without noise, to withdraw, without disturbance, to leave a scene so tidy it became terrifying. Such an offender lived for twin obsessions: absolute control and the erasure of sound. Police moved outward in circles. Brianna's phone showed a series of insulting messages from her boyfriend that night. Their relationship was falling apart. It was the kind of lead that feels obvious. But evidence carried more weight than suspicion. He was in another state that night. That path closed quickly, leaving behind the uncomfortable truth: sometimes the killer is not in the familiar circle. When facts thin out, science steps in. DNA on the doorknob, blood on the pillow, the modeled path through a small home, all combined into a quiet script. The intruder took advantage of the unlocked door, approached the sleeping girl, silenced her into stillness, and left. No loud struggle, only calculated violence. And from that moment, Reno began to realize they were facing not just someone strong, but someone patient, someone who worshipped order. News of Brianna's disappearance spread like wildfire. Within hours, the quiet Reno neighborhood was surrounded by patrol cars, yellow tape, and questions without answers. A man living across the street told detectives that around 5 a.m., he had seen a shadow pass his window and heard someone trying to open his front door before giving up. At first it seemed trivial, but when placed beside the bloody pillow and the unlocked door where Brianna slept, it became a chilling puzzle piece. A predator was testing doors in the dark. Investigators eliminated the obvious suspects. The driver who had given Brianna a ride after the concert came forward after seeing the news reports. He willingly gave a DNA sample, showed proof of his alibi, and was cleared. That pushed the search outward to the unknown hands that moved quietly through the university neighborhood, men who knew the streets, the parking rhythms, the vulnerable pauses between nightlife and dawn. Forensic scientists clung to the one trace the offender could not erase: biology. From the doorknob, the lab pulled a male DNA profile not in any database. With the evidence going cold, Reno police launched an extraordinary effort: door-to-door requests for voluntary samples. About 3,000 DNA swabs were collected. The local lab quickly became overwhelmed. To speed things up, the city asked the public for help and raised $150,000 for additional testing. It was a community spending money and a hope against a void. The results no match. The FBI stepped in. Agents reviewed unsolved cases from the months leading up to Brianna's disappearance. Two reports stood out, like cuts from the same blade. In November 2007, a 21-year-old student was attacked in a parking lot. He overpowered her, showed a gun, but bolted when she screamed at the top of her lungs. In his rush, he dropped a pack of condoms. Then, in December 2007, another student, 22 years old, was ambushed outside her home. He covered her mouth and nose until she lost consciousness. She awoke in the cab of a pickup truck. The attacker forbade her from looking at him, assaulted her, then drove her back to her house and ordered her to walk straight inside without turning around. One detail chilled her memory in the cab. She had noticed a child's shoe. The lab compared the DNA from both attacks. They matched. And when compared with the profile taken from the friend's doorknob in Brianna's case, the conclusion was undeniable. It was the same man. There was another disturbing connection. Both earlier victims said the attacker had taken their underwear with him. These trophies were not random. They revealed a compulsive psychology. He wanted to own a piece of his victims. He wanted chance control and a symbol to keep afterward. Police released a composite sketch based on the descriptions: a white male, average height, strong build, tanned arms, estimated between 28 and 40 years old. The sketch ran in newspapers and on television with a plea for help. Another young woman saw the coverage and reported that someone had once tried her door so violently that it bent the metal, but whoever it was did not manage to get in. That detail matched the predator's signature, testing doors at night until one opened. Panic swept through Reno. Handgun and pepper spray sales skyrocketed. Women no longer felt safe staying home alone. Volunteers combed through forests, drainage ditches, and empty lots with search dogs, while helicopters scanned from above. More than 5,000 tips came in, and still not one pointed to the man they were looking for. The city leaned forward, straining to hear the faintest sound, while the predator thrived in silence. Detectives circled back to the familiar Brianna's boyfriend, who had sent angry texts that night. But phone records showed he had been in another state. He could not be the attacker. That left investigators with the darker truth: this was not a crime of passion or jealousy. It was a pattern of cycle. The offender chose transitional spaces, parking lots, porches, front doors, those brief moments when a person believes safety is just seconds away. That was where he struck, and that was how he won. Winter in Reno seemed to know how to guard a secret until the final moment. After nearly 1 month missing, Brianna's name was whispered in kitchens, printed on billboards, and woven into the uneasy dreams of the city. Then on February 15, 2008, around noon, a worker cut across a vacant lot to save time on his lunch break. Behind a discarded Christmas tree, he saw a pair of socks. At first he thought it was a mannequin. A few heartbeats later, he realized it was a body and called the police with a voice barely steady. The body was naked except for socks. Next to it lay 2 pairs of women's underwear, one belonging to Brianna's friend, who had not even realized it was missing, and one that belonged to no one in that house. The medical examiner confirmed it was Brianna. She had been strangled. The marks on her neck showed that underwear had been used as the weapon. The grim verdict: she had been killed inside the friend's home and moved afterward. The night she disappeared was the night her life ended. The scene was more than disposal. It was theater. The underwear placed beside her body was a twisted message, an exhibition of control. It said, "I decide what to take. I decide where to leave her. I decide how silence will spread." Forensic testing of DNA recovered from Brianna's body confirmed the truth investigators had feared. It matched the profile from the doorknob and the 2 assaults from November and December of 2007. They were facing the same predator, now escalated to murder. In many investigations, finding the body is the beginning of clarity. Here it was the beginning of a deeper silence. Every lead, more than 5,000 tips, the neighbor's glimpse of a shadow, the reports of door handles rattled, led into fog. Police revealed to the public that the offender seemed to collect women's underwear, hoping that a family member, friend, or acquaintance might recall a suspicious drawer or hidden stash. Nothing surfaced. Dozens of detectives pressed forward, but the case froze in place. And then nearly 1 year later, on November 1st, a call came in, anonymously. A woman reported that her friend had once discovered women's underwear inside her boyfriend's pickup truck. His excuse for it was feeble. Even more damning, shortly after Brianna's body was found, the man had sold his truck and left town. His name James Biela, 27 years old. The lines of an unsolved year suddenly converged on one point. The portrait thickened quickly. James was a former Marine trained in martial arts, working construction jobs near the university, the very area where Brianna's friend lived. His past was a trail of violence. An ex-girlfriend said he had struck her multiple times. Once he nearly killed a man with a knife. In another instance, he broke a dog's leg without reason. Yet despite this cruelty, James had never been convicted. His DNA was never in the system. The void in the database now had a human face. Detectives placed him under surveillance and called him in. James agreed to meet without even asking what it was, about a sign of the arrogance of someone who believes himself invisible. He claimed he had been with his girlfriend the night Brianna disappeared. When asked for a DNA sample, he refused. Investigators turned to his ex-girlfriend. She revealed his alibi was a lie. She also shared that they had a 4-year-old son together. With her permission, police collected a DNA sample from the boy. The result came back as near perfect. The killer's DNA matched that of a close relative of the child. Within that narrow circle, the only possible match was James. Detectives returned not with a polite invitation, but with handcuffs. The silence that had cloaked him for a year was broken by the sharp click of metal. From that moment, the anonymous DNA profile on the doorknob had an owner. After the biological lock from the 4-year-old child's DNA, the case closed in around its suspect. James Biela was arrested. While he kept silent, the file spoke for him, a former Marine trained in martial arts who had worked construction sites near the university, familiar with the very neighborhood where Brianna's friend lived. His history of violence, once scattered, now looked like a continuous chain, striking his girlfriend, nearly stabbing a man to death, breaking a dog's leg for no reason. Yet without convictions, his DNA had never entered the system. The gap that had once stalled investigators now bore his name. James agreed to meet with detectives calm, as if he had nothing to fear. He claimed he had been at his girlfriend's house the night Brianna was killed, an alibi that leaned on intimacy. When asked for a DNA sample, he refused. Detectives then spoke with his ex, who revealed the truth: he had not been with her that night. The path back into forensics opened through their 4-year-old son. The DNA test showed a near-perfect match, proving that the offender was a close relative of the child. Within that circle, the only person who fit was James. He was cuffed, the metallic snap, breaking a year of silence. From there, the evidence tightened. His father told detectives about James's long history of drug abuse, the same reason he had been discharged from the Marines. His former employer confirmed that James quit his job the very day Brianna's body was discovered and left the state, an action that traced perfectly onto the investigation's timeline. Investigators found his old van. Fibers from the seat covers matched fibers previously found on the clothing of another student who had been abducted and later released. Still, James denied everything. In court, his defense team tried to separate the cases, arguing that the signatures were too different to belong to one man. But the DNA chain held them together: the same genetic profile from the doorknob, from Brianna's body, and from the assaults in November and December of 2007. The behavioral pattern was consistent: silencing his victims, taking underwear as trophies, striking in transitional spaces like parking lots and front doors. Piece by piece, the portrait became whole. The trial opened as a theater of contradiction. The prosecution laid out the evidence chronologically, from the testimony of survivors to genetic matches to microscopic fibers, constructing a map of behavior: surveillance, approach, control, deprivation, and silent retreat. The defense leaned on his childhood of obesity, his alcoholic father's beatings, and his supposed good behavior in jail, trying to humanize a figure hardening into monstrosity. But on the stand, James smiled, even smirked. Those tiny wordless gestures shifted the jury's view from simple accusation to arrogance. In late May of 2010, the verdict fell like a heavy door, guilty on all counts. The death penalty was on the table. His lawyers begged for mercy, arguing his past, his upbringing, his compliance in custody, but the scales did not move. The judge sentenced him to death. Months later, 4 additional life sentences were added for other charges, a double lock. Even if the execution never happens, freedom is gone forever. In the years that followed, his attorneys filed appeals to the Nevada Supreme Court. Each time the court upheld the death penalty. James remains behind bars, with no execution date scheduled. For the justice system, the case is closed. For the city, a collective of sale. But for Brianna's family, the verdict only pulled the predator out of the night. It did not bring daylight to the darkness he left behind. The judgment closed with 2 Locke's death for Brianna's murder and 4 life sentences for the other crimes. In the years that followed, James's attorneys filed appeal after appeal, but the Nevada Supreme Court upheld the sentence each time. No execution date has been scheduled. Legally, the door is shut. Humanly, it remains slightly open, because the pain of the living has no calendar. James stays behind bars, and silence, the weapon he once loved, has become his prison. Brianna's family refused to stop at grief. They pushed for change, campaigning for Nevada to require DNA collection from anyone arrested for a violent offense. They believed if such a law had been in place earlier, the predator would have been identified after his first attack in November of 2007. Brianna might have lived, continuing toward her dream of helping children. Law born from wounds often becomes the only way to turn loss into protection for those who come after. But life rarely ties itself off neatly. Exactly 10 years after Brianna's murder, her 19-year-old cousin disappeared. After telling her parents she was going to another state with a man she had just met. She never answered her phone again. The family waited and hoped, carrying the warm ache of their first loss, as they feared a second one was unfolding. The question of why no longer belonged solely to the justice system. It became a shadow at every meal, echoing with every ring of the doorbell. From start to finish, this case leaves behind hard symbols, an unlocked door, a pillow with tiny red stains, underwear taken as trophies, and the suffocating quiet of a city asleep. Evil is not only the hand that strangles, it is also the trust we place in thresholds. Justice came, but was it enough if it only caged the offender without untangling the knots in those left behind? If you have ever lost someone, you know that a verdict is only a thin slice of the truth. Share your thoughts about justice, about the responsibility of communities, about the doors we still leave open without noticing. And if you want to keep walking with me through cases where psychology and forensics meet, where answers are never simple, stay with me for the next story.